Welcome to a battlefield of minds. Two grandmasters face off where every move cuts like a sword. One mistake, and it's over. This isn't just chess. It's war disguised as strategy. Let's dive in, move by move, into this epic clash. White plays pawn to d4. Wesley So thrusts a central pawn forward, staking early claim to the center and daring Krishnan Sasikiran into a tense positional fight right from move 1. Black replies with nf6. Sasikiran brings his knight out, challenging the center and preparing flexible defenses. A standard reactive maneuver that keeps options open and eyeballs Wesley's d4 pawn. White plays nf3. Wesley develops a knight toward the center, supporting d4 and preparing kingside harmony. Quick development with intent to castle and pressurize Black's early setup. Black answers c6. Sasikiran fianchettos his kingside, aiming for a solid long diagonal with bishop to g7 and a hypermodern grip on the central squares. White plays bg5. Wesley pins an imagined knight, deploys the bishop aggressively to g5, creating early tension and psychological pressure on Black's development. Black plays bj7. Sasikiran completes his fianchetto, eyeing the long diagonal and saying, "Bring it on," to White's central ambitions with a calm, flexible structure. White plays nbd2. Wesley develops his queen knight to d2, reinforcing f3 and c4 squares, keeping the center supported while maintaining strategic flexibility. Black castles 0-0-0. Sasikiran tucks his king safely away, connects rooks and signals readiness for middle-game operations. The battle lines start to form across the center and kingside. White plays c3. Wesley shores up the d4 pawn, prepares a b4 or d4 advance later, and creates a modest pawn chain for a disciplined, slow-burn central approach. Black plays h6. Sasikiran forces Wesley's bishop decision, questioning the g5 outpost and trying to pry open White's coordination on the king's side with a provocative pawn move. White retreats bh4. Wesley keeps his bishop active rather than trading, preserving the pin threat and maintaining tension. Small, patient, and a little taunting. Black plays z6. Sasikiran solidifies his pawn structure, preparing e5 or guarding e5 square. A classical, pragmatic reply to White's central build-up. White plays e4. Wesley explodes in the center, advancing the pawn to e4 and signaling the transition into sharp, tactical middle game plans with ambition and tempo. Black plays nbd7. Sasikiran develops his queen knight to d7, and reinforcing f5 and f6, aiming to reroute or support central counterplay while keeping the structure compact. White plays bc4. Wesley places his bishop on an aggressive diagonal toward f7. Eyeing kingside pressure, and ready to exploit any looseness near black's castle. Black plays g5. Sasikiran punishes the g5 bishop presence aggressively, launching a pawn storm that chases pieces and creates chaotic, double-edged complications on the king side. White plays bg3. Wesley calmly retreats the bishop to g3, keeping it alive and aiming back at black's king side. Tension increases as pawns fly forward in front of black's king. Black plays nh5, p5. Sasikiran advances a knight to a5, adding pressure to g3 and eyeing tactical leaps. A slightly risky knight excursion with attacking intent. White plays bh4. Wesley sidesteps again, forcing the knight's ambitions to be tested and preserving the bishop pair's flexibility in a messy, pawn-strewn battlefield. Black plays nhfx6. Sasikiran repositions the h5 knight back to f6, consolidating and avoiding any tactical ambush, signaling caution after the earlier aggressive thrust. White plays bg3. Wesley shuffles the bishop back to g3, insistently keeping a long-range piece focused on the king side and maintaining latent tactical threats. Black plays nh5, 5. Sasikiran again nudges a knight to a5. Attempting to provoke reactions and keep white guessing, the knight's dance begins. Testing weaknesses. Tent, Pinistan. White plays n f1. Wesley reroutes his knight to f1, preparing to support e3 or g3 squares and ready to jump into the central fray with renewed coordination. Black plays c5. Sasikiran strikes at the center with pawn c5, challenging d4 and opening lines, an assertive attempt to undermine Wesley's central wedge. White plays e3. Wesley brings his knight to e3, aiming for d5 or g4, bolstering central presence and preparing tactical counterpunches as the center heats up. Black plays inks z3. Sasikiran's knight on hf5 crashes into g3, capturing Wesley's bishop and trading material to blunt White's long-range pressure, a sharp tactical shot that changes textures. White replies hxd3. Wesley recaptures with the h-pawn, opening the h-file and sacrificing pawn structure to keep piece activity. The kingside fractures and drama intensifies. Black plays cxd4, pu, shuriwen, instead s4. Sasikiran's pawn from c5 captures on d4, eliminating White's central pawn and opening files. The center explodes and both sides must calculate carefully. White plays angst4. Wesley's knight jumps to d4 to recapture the pawn, centralizing a piece and fighting back for control of the now messy center with combative intent. Black plays nefiv. Sasikiran places a knight on a5, owning crucial central squares, threatening forks and exchanges, and trying to convert his earlier pawn break into dynamic play. White plays bb3. Wesley retreats his bishop to b3, keeping diagonal ambitions alive and indirectly eyeing potential weaknesses on the king side, while avoiding pawn hits. Black plays e6. Sasikiran solidifies his central pawn structure, opens the diagonal for his dark squared bishop, and prepares to challenge White's centralized pieces. White plays Fowler. Wesley storms forward with a pawn push, increasing kingside pressure and signaling aggressive intentions to open lines toward Black's monarch. Black plays n6, and Sasikiran shifts a knight to g6, aiming to blockade, contest Fowler, and prepare countermeasures against Wesley's advancing pawns and mounting kingside threats. White plays 5. Wesley thrusts his pawn into enemy territory, forcing lines open and ripping apart Black's kingside comfort. This is full-throttle aggression. Black plays x5. Sasikiran captures on f5 with the e-pawn, liquidating the advanced pawn, but creating dynamic imbalances and opening the e-file for tactical fireworks. White plays ndx5. Wesley's knight from d4 leaps to 5, capturing that pawn, reclaiming material and landing on a menacing outpost close to Black's king, dramatic and precise. Black plays bsf5. Sasikiran's bishop captures on f5, exchanging pieces to relieve pressure and trade off White's active knight. A pragmatic reaction under fire. White plays nxf5. Wesley's other knight swoops in to recapture on f5, regaining material and maintaining a dominating knight near Black's kingside, aggression rewarded with central control. Black plays qf6. Sasikiran brings his queen into play to f6, centralizing major firepower, guarding key squares, and lining up potential tactics against White's kingside cluster. White castles 0-0. Wesley finally tucks his king to safety with 0-0. Connects the rooks and signals readiness to mobilize heavy pieces into the brewing storm. Black plays qf5. Sasikiran centralizes the queen to f5, offering trade options and probing weaknesses. A queen sortie that eyes g3 and the long diagonals. White plays qsd6. Wesley's queen captures on 6, snatching a central pawn and opening lines, a material grab that swings momentum and jolts the position into tactical terrain. Black plays kek7. Sasikiran sidesteps his king to h7, trying to avoid checks, reduce tactical motifs and keep the king out of immediate danger amid heavy centralized pieces. White plays radon. Wesley brings his rook to dun, occupying the half-open file, pressuring d7 squares and coordinating heavy pieces for an assault on Black's position. Black plays k-gate. Sasikiran retreats his king to gate, tucking further into relative safety and hoping to weather White's mounting initiative without structural collapse. White plays ra1. One switch b1. Wesley swings a rook to a1, a patient reorganization that keeps tactical options flexible, while doubling rooks may be planned later for the d-file. Black plays k7. Sasikiran moves his king back to 7, oddly shuffling but avoiding immediate tactics. The king dance reveals nerves as pieces crowd the center. White plays Raydon, Mi Wei, Osti Siwa Min, Pedanakshan Cool. Wesley returns a rook to dun, Hen Suan. Completing rook redeployment and signaling full intent to dominate the d-file with heavy artillery aimed at black's camp. Black plays Re8. Sasikiran responds by placing a rook on 8, contesting central control and preparing to contest open files. A counterweight to Wesley's growing pressure. White plays Q7. White. Wesley slides his queen to 7, Q1 penetrating deep into black's territory, eyeing weaknesses, and coordinating with rooks for potentially decisive threats. Black plays N7. Sasikiran develops his knight to E7, Tuwudbo Penius Siwas Pen, blocking the queen's path and preparing to exchange or defend critical central squares under mounting pressure. White plays NC7, Peniel Wooden, and N7. Wesley's knight captures on G7, taking material and ripping apart black's kingside pawn shield, a sharp tactical blow that smells of blood. Black plays KXSD7, Timul went to win Puris. Sasikiran recaptures with his king on G7, stepping into the open and accepting an exposed monarch to regain material balance. Risky and brave. White plays QXB7-7. Wesley's queen grabs a pawn on B7, scooping material and prying open black's queenside. The material edge widens while black's king remains vulnerable. Black plays A5. Sasikiran pushes a pawn to A5, trying to generate counterplay on the queen side and distract white from the kingside fireworks, a fighting move to complicate matters. White plays R7. Wesley invades with a rook to 7. Penetrating black's camp and pressuring weak pawns and pieces. The rooks are now active predators in enemy territory. Black plays A5. Sasikiran advances the H-pawn, seeking Luft, space, or to blunt white's rooks and open lines for counterplay, practical but slightly desperate under pressure. White plays QC7. Wesley's queen slides to 7. Centralizing again, threatening forks or infiltration, and keeping tactical tension high as the rooks and queen coordinate. Black plays QC4. Sasikiran captures on E4 with his queen, taking back central material and aiming to simplify an attempt to reduce pressure by liquidating central pawns. White plays Q5. Wesley's queen takes on F5, grabbing black's pawn and continuing the marauding spree. Material advantage increases while black scrambles to hold. Black plays Q3. Sasikiran replies with a check from E3, trying to create counter threats and harass Wesley's king while seeking tactical shots to complicate the simplification. White plays Cone Re. Wesley sidesteps his king to Hone, calmly avoiding checks and keeping the king tucked behind a pawn shield while his forces dominate the center and queenside. Black plays QXG3. Sasikiran captures on g3 with his queen, taking a pawn that opened earlier and hoping to generate mating or tactical chances by infiltrating white's bastion. White plays q5 and 4 mil and take. Wesley calmly places his queen on c5, centralizing with threats and keeping eye on c-file and potential infiltration. Precise domination after the tactical melee. Black plays ng6. Sasikiran repositions a knight to g6, trying to block lines, defend important squares, and create counter-threats despite looming material deficits. White plays bxssfn p-royal. Wesley's bishop captures on f7. A dramatic strike that takes a pawn and exposes black's king further. Bold. Surgical. And emotionally electric. Black plays kh6. Sasikiran's king steps forward to h6. An uncomfortable march into the open. Trying to dodge tactics but walking into potential, discoverable danger. White plays kc6. Wesley's queen storms to chicks. Central and menacing. Coordinating attack routes and eyeing decisive incursions, the pressure cooker reaches near boiling. Black plays rx7 Tori. Sasikiran's rook captures on f7, recouping material and trying to blunt white's incursion. Exchanging pieces in hopes of survival amid a collapsing position. White plays rdx f7. Wesley's rook from c7 captures on f7, reasserting dominance and keeping the initiative, turning material gains into concrete tactical threats against black's exposed king. Black plays re1 Uliwal. Sasikiran counters with rook to Aeoni. Zaking activity. Counterchecks. And looking for any geometric resource to complicate white's clear superiority. White plays rf6. Wesley lifts his rook to f6, intensifying pressure, threatening decisive penetrations, and coordinating with queen and other rook for a final crushing blow. Black plays xf1 Moni. Sasikiran's rook captures on f1, delivering a check, grabbing material and forcing exchanges in a last-ditch attempt to simplify into an endgame where survival might be possible. White plays rxf1 ring. Wesley recaptures on f1 with his rook, neutralizing the checking rook and keeping control of active files, calmly converting advantages with clinical technique. Black plays g4. Sasikiran pushes g4, trying to open lines and create chaos around white's king or offer counterplay. A desperate pawn lunged to complicate matters. White plays qf6. Wesley's queen returns to f6, centralizing above enemy lines, eyeing decisive threats, and menacingly coordinating with rooks. All pieces hum in harmony for the final act. Black plays h4. Sasikiran advances h4, attempting to generate luft or attack targets. But it's a thin resource against Wesley's overwhelming coordination and material edge. White plays qf2. Wesley retreats the queen to f2, consolidating tactical advantages while keeping the pressure poised. Precise, measured, and ready for a final orchestration. Black plays Q5. Sasikiran brings his queen to A5, trying to trade queens or create checks. A practical attempt to reduce white's attacking potential through liquidation. White plays QD2 H7 and Wesley replies with QD2 and win. A checking move that consolidates dominance and forces black into reactive play, squeezing the last air from Sasikiran's position. Hey. Black plays K5 E3. Sasikiran's king heads to F5. An exposed, heroic trek that tries to escape the net, but only increases the dramatic sense of inevitable collapse. White plays QD4 Troin. Wesley advances QD4. Central and domineering. Cutting escape squares and coordinating final threats with surgical precision, the noose tightens. Black plays QA2. Sasikiran counters with QA2, attempting perpetual or checks, zaking any drawing resource while juggling a precarious, exposed king. White plays QF2. Wesley slides back to F2, blocking counterplay and keeping the queenside and center firmly under his command while preparing the finishing sequence. Black plays QC4. Sasikiran moves his queen to C4, probing for skewer or perpetual chances, trying to complicate the path to mate but running out of safe squares. White plays B3. Wesley closes with pawn to B3. A quiet finalizing move that consolidates, prevents checks, and declares the attack decisive, resignation inevitable, as white's dominance prevails. The video ends here. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. Please, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thank you again. Everyone, see you in the next video.